Welcome to another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports News Radio. Also, this episode will hopefully be uploaded to the YouTube channel, The Nation of Israel. Thank you for joining us. If you have any questions, you can email us at arilewisshow@hotmail.com. Our guest this evening wrote a very fascinating book. She is a journalist and an artist and a mother and a teacher. And it's great to welcome to the program Liane Grunberg Wakabayashi. Did I get that right?
Close enough.
Okay.
Wakabayashi.
You know, I rehearsed this name for like a good week, and I knew I would butcher it, and it's kind of embarrassing, but I did really put a good effort. I tried. Love the book. You're a very international person. That would be kind of an understatement because Romanian father, British mother, you were born in Montreal, grew up in New York,
Yes.
lived in Tokyo for 30 years,
Yes.
and now you're in Israel.
That's right.
That's pretty international. Your experiences seeing the whole world, does that help you in Israel or not help you?
I would say it's more a question of finding out where is home. You know, I grew up in New York as a Canadian citizen until I was 16. I wasn't an American. And
But you were in America.
And I had no memory of Canada because I left when I was about 2. And my mother had this beautiful London accent. My father had this kind of dashing Romanian accent. And so this question of identity has always been something that I've carried with me.
So one reason I bring this up, because I feel like people that make Aliyah at a certain time, it's kind of like a bit easier if they come here, let's say they're 10 years old, because they'll stop kind of identity crisis. You know, if they come from America, they'll feel like partly American, partly Israeli, but they just seem to adapt. Do you look at certain things in Israel and say, well, you know, in Tokyo, they did it like this, and this way was better? Do you do those kind of things?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And what example?
It's a game.
Customer service?
It's a game. Just standing on the train platform, and if there's going to be delays or a change of schedule, they're going to announce it.
Right. That would be a normal thing to do.
That would be a normal thing to do.
They do that in Tokyo, in New York, and every other normal city in the planet.
And if there are 2 exits, they tell you this exit is to this street and this exit is to the other street. And then they kindly put a map in the middle of the platform showing you which way to go and what you'll find when you get out of the exit, which buildings and where you're orienting you.
So I remember when the light rail came out, you know, I had such nachas, people were so proud. And I was thinking, you know, basically every major city, including Tokyo, has had one of those for a long time. Is that correct?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so we are a bit behind, but at least maybe we're catching up a bit. But Tokyo, very good public transportation. People use that a lot because it's such a big city. It's kind of like Manhattan in some ways.
Yes, and they keep adding to it as well.
Do you ever look at things in Israel and think, well, in Romania they did this better? You know, my dad told me that in Romania this was better, that kind of thing.
I've only been to Romania once, and that was for 48 hours, so I'm not qualified to speak of Romania. But I love that part of being here, of having that background in Japan and appreciating so many things that came from Japanese culture. And I get nostalgic about vending machines. If I'm thirsty, there's always a vending machine nearby. If I come out of a train station, there's always buses and shops and arcades waiting wherever you are in Japan, in Tokyo. And here you walk out and there's a parking lot. Go, huh? Where's the commerce? Where's the lost opportunity that to have businesses around a train station? You just don't see that here. So yes, I do come from that orientation, but I also think too about what Japan is so missing, and it has to do with the heart and people and sharing meals together and singing in the streets and humor, and there's so much warmth here that's indescribable. That's kind of Japanese try to compensate by making these glorious cafes that are actually more like cathedrals.
Oh wow!
Like spiritual centers. What Starbucks does in Japan is unbelievable. Now they've kind of invaded the national parks. They're putting these fantastic glass-walled Starbucks right in the center of these gorgeous parks, and it becomes a retreat place for many people, a sanctuary, and in a way a spiritual oasis in the absence of other kinds of spiritual community. People find their community in cafes in Japan. That was my experience.
That's a big part of their culture.
It is. And when I say find community, you go there to be alone. But there's this pleasantness of everyone being alone, or couples or people talking here and there, but you just basically feel comfortable spending time on your own in this fantastic setting.
You see that nowadays, though. For example, people will work at a coffee shop, go on a Wi-Fi. That kind of isolation. You're around people, but you're kind of zoned in on what you got to do.
It is. That's what Japan is very good at it, but they've gone overboard. And with COVID, what we're seeing since COVID, they've put up partitions, plastic partitions, in a lot of these cafes, which are so isolating. You really feel now that you're in your cubicle when you go to a coffee shop. It's not a good feeling. That was my recent experience a few months ago.
That was the last time you were in Tokyo?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
So already you've seen a change since you were there for 30 years.
Yeah, I did, and I hope it's temporary, because we were still coming out of the COVID drama, and maybe those partitions will be gone in a few months. I hope so.
You know, something I want to point out, in preparing for this interview, I was thinking that one of the most left out parts as far as studying the Bible is when Abraham has kids after Isaac. A lot of people forget that. There's a lot of people probably watch like, wait, he had more kids? He actually had 8 in total, 6 after Isaac. And it says in the Bible that those children went out to the east and were given gifts, names such as Jokshan, Midian, Ishbak, Shua, and Zimran. And so most people don't know those names. Most people haven't studied that part.
And where did you find these names?
It's in the Bible.
Really?
See, this is what I'm saying. This is the thing, like, where most people don't realize it, because it's the end of Chayei Sarah. You have this episode where Abraham's burying his wife in Hebron, and Yitzchak gets married, and most people think the parsha ends there. But at the end, it kind of Torah sneaks us in. It says that Abraham, married Keturah and had 6 children, has those names them. Right. It says that Abraham gave them gifts, and there's arguments and sent them to the east. And a lot of people think the east would be the Orient, Japan, China, etc. Did you know it's a correlation Jewish-wise and what is practiced out there?
Sure. There's, and I bring those correlations up in my book quite a bit. When, as you probably remember, right, with the sacrifice of Isaac, there's actually on April 15th a sacrifice of Isaac festival. It's called Itzhak Matsuri Festival, and it's held close to a mountain called Mount Moriah, and and this is a Shinto practice. Common people don't get the connections with Judaism. I personally believe that the higher-ranking Shinto priests know exactly what they're doing and who Isaac was and why they're doing a reenactment of the sacrifice of Isaac in the spring, April 15th, around the time.
Well, maybe they picked tax day.
They could have done that.
I'm kidding, of course. No, interesting. Springtime, as it's in the Bible says, the Pesach is the springtime, but they're not going by the Hebrew calendar. They're going by a different way.
That's right. They're going.
Is it possible that some of those priests are actually Jewish? The reason why I bring this up, because a couple of years ago, there's a joke, is the Pope Catholic? Meaning like it's so obvious. But a couple of years ago, there was a man in the running for Pope that was actually Jewish. His parents were Shoah survivors, and he was saying Kaddish for them. They died in the Shoah. He was saying Kaddish for them. He knew he was Jewish. And he was in the running for the Pope. So I'm curious, as some of the Shinto priests, do you know if there's a chance they're really Jewish or are Jewish?
Let's put it this way. There hasn't been a son born in a long time to the imperial family. Now the son's maybe 15, 16, but when he was born, 8 days after, there was a circumcision.
Wow.
And
wow.
On the 8th day, and it was public. It was reported in the press. Did they explore why he had the circumcision? What was the significance of the 8th day? No, it was just reported as fact. But for us in the know, it was eyebrow raising. Like, really, really, it was incredible. So
They just happened to pick the 8th day, huh?
no, it wasn't happened to. Everything's significant, as we know, and in Shinto faith, as you know, there's no effigies that you can't. They say there's thousands of gods, but you don't actually see any of them. They're all right. It's more this belief of that God is everywhere, right? The idea that God is everywhere is a cornerstone of Shintoism.
So they don't have pictures of their gods.
No. But you see, the Japanese have two faiths for the most part. The saying is you are born into the Shinto religion and you die as a Buddhist. And the Buddhists do have effigies. They have these glorious golden idols. If you follow mainstream Buddhism. And if not, there's Zen Buddhism, which Zen Buddhism doesn't have any of the trappings of idol worship. Again, it's more like Shintoism in that you are at one with the environment, but there's nothing to guide you in to look at, which is fascinating.
And then their prayer rituals, isn't a lot of it just meditation? Or is it expensive?
In Zen Buddhism, a lot is meditation.
Okay.
In what I'd call mainstream Buddhism, and there's different branches, it's more a priest leading the chanting, and then people following. And people don't come because it's Sunday or they come because there's been a death in the family. That's usually in Buddhism why you go to the temple to bury the dead. Whereas with Shintoism, it's more to do with the beginning of life. This is where you take the newborn baby to be blessed at the Shinto shrine, and then you have a nice meal and you're dressed in your fancy kimono, and it's a photo opportunity. Again, with the Shintoism, there isn't so much, there's not community. You go as a family.
But do people go to these places, let's say if they're going through a life crisis, not necessarily beginning or end of life, but they have some crisis, they go because of that?
That's a really great question, and I would say definitely. I remember there was one priest who always showed up at family funerals, and they usually put him next to me. And he was wonderful. He was so curious. He had a real psychological bent. He was curious about what made people tick and what my religion was about. He asked such probing questions. And he was blind, actually. I remember he was blind, but you could see from his questions what a great listener he would be and how much practiced he was in hearing people's stories. Now, where is the Buddhist temple located? In most places, it's connected to the graveyard. So people come, the tradition is you go to the Buddhist temple, you purchase for the equivalent of $1 or $2 a stick of incense, you pick up a bucket with your name on it, and you bring the flowers that you've brought to the grave, and you go around the temple to the back to the grave. And you put your incense sticks in, and you light them up. And you put the flowers in the holders, and you say your prayer. Now, on the way in and the way out, you do have a chance to unburden your heart if you feel you need to the priest or the priest's wife, or they're chatty and friendly. And you can also go into the temple. Their home is what the classic tatami mat, sliding paper door, shoji screen rooms that you see in the movies. I mean, this is where they live. And so you're already transformed from being in this incredible space. And Zen temples or Buddhist temples tend to have surrounding them gorgeous gardens, really oases in the middle of the city or in the countryside. So I would say that it's a package of going in, going there to do your business with the loved ones, with the dead, but also connecting with the priest in a casual way, and unburdening yourself, speaking about whatever's going on. So I remember accompanying my in-laws, and they would chat in the vestibule called the Genkan of the Buddhist temple, for however many minutes they needed to chat. And you could see the chat was therapeutic. It wasn't just about the weather, but it was, and it could be sound casual, but it was connection. It was a way of connecting with people who were part of their lives for generations, and seriously for generations.
So I find that fascinating because in Judaism we try to make a separation between people that are dead, like Tameh. You have to wash your hands after going to a graveyard. And generally we do not set up synagogues near graveyards. It's pretty rare. So do the Japanese look at death differently than maybe we do?
Oh, yeah. I would say they definitely, that's an astute observation. That's really good.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
I can't explain that except to say that Tokyo's a crowded city. There's not space. There isn't space. Everything's packed together. If you're in the countryside, I remember visiting my ex-mother-in-law's family graveyard, and there wasn't the bodies were not cremated. The bodies were put into graves, and the family had their own grave, like mini courtyard, and it was spacious. It was more like parkland, and there was a separation from the temple because we were in the countryside. So I would say it's more a function of being in the middle of a very, very intense city, that it's like, as you perfectly described it.
Well, basically more it's an issue of logistics.
Yeah, or setting. But as I said, the nature in these places creates a fantastic buffer. The trees, the hydrangea bushes, the camellia bushes blooming in every season. Something is blooming different in a Japanese garden. So it's a very peaceful, tranquil, transformative setting when you walk into either a Buddhist temple or a Shinto shrine space because of nature.
This is another episode of the Ari Lewis Show. The book is The Wagamai Bride. Did I say that correctly?
Wagamama.
So I really like this book. One of the things you mentioned was when you got to Tokyo that you were there, I think, before there was Chabad. Chabad came later.
That's right.
So before Chabad came, the type of, if you were going to look for Judaism, would it be conservative Judaism that was there?
There was only a conservative shul, yes.
Okay. And you would call yourself now modern Orthodox?
Yeah, I guess so.
You don't want no one likes to be boxed. Some people don't like to be boxed, and some people do. But what would be the difference, you'd say, between the conservative Judaism you saw in Tokyo versus modern Orthodox in Israel?
Oh, you can't even compare. First of all, we're talking about a very, very, very small population in Tokyo
That practiced conservative Judaism.
Yeah, we're talking. Although in the 80s it was more. Now even less. But back then, think of who we were. We were teachers, students, journalists, business people, travelers. This was the population. Transients were moving in and out. Expats came for a few years. So there was a sense of you could say instability on one hand, but this wonderful synagogue provided us with a weekly anchor. The anchor of a Shabbos meal, the anchor of a Kiddush lunch, the anchor of holidays. So it served a very important part in our lives. Bringing, and this was for me the first experience of going to shul and being in the United Nations, right? Being in a situation where, I shouldn't say UN, the UN has double meaning here, but being in a place where Jews came from Australia and Canada and France and Belgium and just all over the world. This was fascinating to me, to be with so many different kinds of people, different Jewish experiences.
And it was important for you to maintain a certain level of Judaism when you were in Tokyo.
Yeah, the bar was real low, so it wasn't
so hard to climb, but
the bar was low, but the bar was basically show up and thank you for showing up, right? And I was very grateful for having that experience in the early months of my time in Japan. And I met friends who are friends still to this day through that experience. It was such a bonding experience to be with each other for a Shabbos meal.
And then later Chabad comes in, and one of my favorite parts of the book is your daughter Shoshana brings, it sounds like a pet monkey.
Oh, yes.
Right, and then Chabad were like, but that's not kosher, and you had to kind of bridge that gap. So tell us about that.
She wanted to give her pet monkey. It was an orange and pink.
This wasn't a doll. This is a real monkey.
No. It's a pet.
Okay.
No, it's a toy. It's a toy.
But they were concerned about it anyway, even though it wasn't a real animal.
Yeah, they said, we don't allow our children to have books with farm animals that aren't kosher, or lions or tigers in it. Or the Rebbe actually discouraged this as well. So an animal, a toy animal that looked like a monkey, was not kosher. It was not. So yeah, I had to explain lots of things to my children, that we were different, that we were not following their way of going through childhood. It was confusing. It was confusing for all of us. But at the same time, I felt there were so many things that I admired and wanted to emulate in the way they were raising their children.
The Chabad house.
Oh yeah, there was so much goodness. I thought, look, I'm from a family with 2 children. The Chabad Rebbitzins, one of 7. The Chabad rabbis, one of, I think, 11. Okay, so 7 and 11 is 18. Okay, do you understand? They know more about children, even if they were half my age. It didn't matter. They understood what the potential of a family, and the fact that children are not meant to be cookie cutters of their parents. I thought this was fascinating because I just assumed, and my parents somehow insinuated, that the Chabad children just become like their parents without any individuality. And I saw that wasn't true at all. And that was so interesting to me, how the children expressed their true nature, and how the Rabbi and Rebbitzin actually encouraged my children to do the same. I thought that was really, really wonderful, by spotlighting their strengths, by going right in on what the children were good at, their kindnesses, their way of wanting to take care of the younger children, or whatever it was. They would point these things out. So celebrating any little win that a child had, that was a big lesson for me to see that.
So bringing up your children, there was an episode of a series called The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. I don't know if you heard of the show, but this was season 2. It was a very interesting sitcom because this was a little bit after The Cosby Show. But basically, the cast was African American. And there was an episode where Will's Aunt Janice was going to marry a white guy, and Will's mom, Viola, was against the marriage. She said, marriage is hard enough as it is. Now you're going to have bigotry come in and interrace, etc. So you were in a marriage where you have a husband who's not Jewish and is Asian, and and you grew up in New York. So did you experience bigotry in Japan from that aspect?
For my children?
Yeah, did they and you as well?
I would say with me less so, because you have to care about it for it to affect you.
Okay.
So I didn't care.
You kind of knew people were saying stuff, but you just whatever, we didn't care.
Well, I knew maybe I was denied an apartment because I would walk in and then they'd look at me, and then if Aki went in, Ichiro, my ex, walked in, they'd show him different apartments. That was
a sign. It's a problem.
Yeah, you see him go, oh, that's what it feels like. So, okay, but there were so many other things that were working, and there was actually favoritism toward people like me, blue-eyed, white-skinned foreigners they immediately thought I could teach English. They wanted to learn English with me. They wanted to socialize with me, and I say me, this is kind of a generic thing. That back, and I'm talking about the 80s and 90s, not talking about now because I'm not qualified to talk about now, but back then there was I would almost say a kind of innocence in the way they would come and ask, would you teach us English? Would you come over for dinner? Could we travel together? Would you like to come to our villa, our country villa? It was this idea that, wow, we have an opportunity to learn about foreign people, and we really want to. And you seem like a nice person, and so we want to be generous with you and show you our world. So that's what I experienced over and over and over again, which made it really pleasant to stay. That people were kind and well-meaning and really helpful. And I felt they had my back in a way during hard times. It was very nice to know that I didn't feel alone in that culture, especially in the years before I learned Japanese.
And then, but your children, were they able, because I remember you discussed that your daughter had an issue when she was 14. She'd be hospitalized. Was that due to prejudice? She wasn't comfortable with what was going on?
I would say I didn't understand what was different about her, but she was different from day one. And she was a very, very sensitive child with an artistic nature and much more of an introspective type. I'm introspective as well, so I didn't see it as a problem because I thought, I'm introspective. She's an introspective child.
Maybe introverted too.
Yes, that's what I meant. Introverted and introspective, both. It went together. Really self-reflecting, that's the way she was, and I was too. So that didn't seem to be an issue until she reached elementary school age, and then she shut down and wouldn't speak in the class for 6 years, and that was a major, major worry that I had. And my daughter's father thought it was no problem. He just said, she'll outgrow it. I said that we really have to kind of wait till that happens. Can't we find a solution now? So we started to differ in our educational philosophy and approaches and what we wanted for the children. He wanted a mainstream Japanese kid to come out of this experience of marriage with a person like me. And I wanted a well-rounded, dual or double identity child who could make their own choices and pick and choose from the best of both cultures. Because I really I love a lot about Japanese culture. I see the good in it. And I thought, yeah, it wouldn't be wonderful to be able to take from both cultures.
But your son adjusted easier, it sounds like.
He was more of an easy, yes. And to this day, he's
back there, correct?
He's there. It's adaptable, very adaptable.
But he went back to do kind of Jewish work in Japan. He's working with a rabbi?
He's doing two things. He's working in the import-export kosher business that the Chabad rabbi has set up.
Oh, wow, okay.
And Seiji speaks 3 languages, so he's helpful to the rabbi as a translator and interpreter. And the other 3 days a week, I call it his bodybuilding job, he's a rickshaw driver, which is basically, he's in the tourism industry, and he gives people rides on a rickshaw, pulls them through the streets, and points out this temple and this shrine and this ancient shopping street. And he's a tour guide, and he does it in 3 languages, depending on who he's with, and he loves it.
You mentioned the Chabad rabbi, so my assumption would be is that he's originally from New York. Is that correct?
No, from Kfar Chabad.
Oh, okay. So he has difficulty with the Japanese, and your son helps him?
Well, he's been there in Japan for coming on over 23 years.
Okay, so I hope his Japanese will be pretty good.
His Japanese is pretty good, but like me, I can't read Japanese. I wouldn't trust my Japanese to read something, documents. Although now we've got Google Translate.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
It's a whole different world.
Yes.
But still, he could turn to my son and Seiji could translate.
Okay.
very well for him.
And then, but your daughter made a decision she came to Israel at 19,
Right.
and she's still here.
That's right.
So she just felt more comfortable in Israel than in Japan. She likes the culture here better.
I guess you would have to ask her that question.
But you're a Jewish mother. You can you have intuition.
You can be a lawyer.
Let's put it this way: she wasn't pleased when I said to her after a few weeks in Israel, I said, "We're not going back."
Okay.
I said, "We're staying. We're staying." Said, "What do you mean we're staying?" I said, "We're staying. We just brought 2 suitcases. Find an apartment, stay." And so there was the whole scenario around that decision is in the book. I won't give it away. I won't spoil it, but just to say that it was time to look after her future, to see where she was heading if we had stayed in Japan. And I saw that it was not a kind, to put it mildly, not a kind culture to people who are different. And she knew that. And so she was falling in the cracks back in Japan. And I said, let's try Israel. Let's see how it is here. Let's try for a year to see how it is. And so she became agreeable to that. And it didn't hurt that we had a soft landing. We got in a place in Yamin Moshe. We had this beautiful view outside. Woke up to the sun rising over the old city. And she's very aesthetic. She's a very artistic person. And she was very moved by the beauty of Jerusalem and became a mosaic artist pretty early on after we arrived here. And now she does stained glass as well. And she is learning Hebrew. I'm learning Hebrew. And she's also a caregiver. She helps all kinds of people with I should say all kinds of families with their loved ones if they're in a difficult situation. She's very compassionate and patient. And so she's found her place here in a really kind of her own separate world, a separate life. But we do live together. It's good. It's good. I say to her, "Don't you ever get tired of me?" And she goes, "No." So for now, we're enjoying our years together.
You know, what's interesting is Israel, one of the things I really like about Israel is that you see Jews from all different backgrounds, all different countries, but sometimes native Israelis can be kind of stupid. And I'll point out to a friend of mine who blogged about this on Facebook. It was very funny. Her name is now Sarah Axelrod, but it used to be Sarah Chen. And she grew up originally from Wisconsin, but her father is Chinese. So Israelis would just say, "Where in China are you from?" She's like, "No, I'm American." Yeah. But before America, you were in China, right? Beijing? No, I'm American. So have the Israelis been kinder to your daughter than they were to Sarah Chen?
You know, I don't even want to cluster all Israelis as if we were one group of people. We're not. And she's really found her own niche in different ways. She has made friends with a lot of the Japanese who live in Jerusalem, and in fact, the press, the journalists or bureau chiefs from Tokyo, who she never would have a chance to meet if we were back in Tokyo, became her buddies and hangout friends. And so that was really nice that she was actually able to engage on a social level with her tribe. But in this setting, in Israel, was incredible. So that's one track. And the other track, I have to say, and going through hospitalization with a family member is horrible, awful. But one of the silver linings was she met amazing young women there. Talented, creative, sensitive, caring young women who became her friends, and they're very comfortable with each other. They understand they understand each other without a lot of words and complications, and that's a gift. It's a tremendous gift to meet her tribe here, and I would say that mental illness is considered shame, something to be embarrassed about. And we decided from early on that we were going to be open about bipolar disorder. I was asked to write an article for the Jerusalem Post about my daughter's stay at Eitanim Hospital, and I did it. This was really, I think, my first year in Israel, and so I did it, and we did it as a family with the intention that we were going to be open, and anyone who was going to be connected with our family or my daughter would just understand the dynamics, the story, who we were, and accept us for being different. I say us, and I have to say too that when you have a child, whatever age, as a parent, you are so enmeshed and invested in their healing prospects that for me, much as I love Japan, I had to be here for her. I knew that it was only fair to give her the best opportunities that she could in life, and it wasn't over there. So once we understood that, everything that I do in Israel is with that question in mind: is this good for her now? Is this good for her future? Is this opening up new creative paths, opening up new opportunities for work or for friendship, whatever? I think about this. And Israel's fantastic because there's so many different organizations that support families that have children, young adults, older adults who are different.
It really is an immigrant country, and something I get very frustrated. I've been here 15 years, but something I still get very frustrated with native-born Israelis is that they seem to forget it's an immigrant country when their parents or their grandparents, at the most, immigrated. It's not like America with someone's family's been there 150 years. I mean, you're talking about the most 50, 60 years. So this is an immigrant country. It's something we should embrace because I think that is one of the advantages Israel has over other countries. You have people from all over the world coming. It truly is a melting pot. It's different. America will say they're a melting pot, but when you look at the numbers a little bit, but Israel really is a melting pot.
Really, and that's what's very exciting about it.
I think it's part of the reason Israel does so well in high tech and a lot of businesses, a lot of inventions, because they're taking thoughts and ideas of things they learn. There's actually different explanations of why the Jews had to be in the Galut. And one positive answer is so we can learn from other cultures,
right,
which is what your book is about.
I think maybe there's another reason why Israel has to be in the location it is, because it's connecting Africa to Europe, to the Middle East, and to the Far East. The location is really encouraging this melting pot.
It really is the center of the world when you really look at it.
It really is.
This is another episode of The Ari Lewis Show. You can email us at arilewishow@hotmail.com, and here's the book right here. It's a very nice cover. I want to ask you a quasi-personal question. If you don't feel comfortable answering, that's fine. But I take a look. It looks like you still kept your name.
I did.
So you feel comfortable doing that?
It's my children's name.
Okay.
I mean, that's the way I see it.
Okay.
It was really important.
But my understanding is that you still have a very amicable relationship with your ex.
Yes. He understands and why it was necessary to make the shift. He's very, very grateful for how well our daughter is doing. And I appreciate that he appreciates, that he knows. And even his mother-in-law on our last trip told my daughter that she sometimes feels she doesn't belong in Japan. Here's a woman who's lived in Japan for 86 years.
Wow.
And she says, sometimes I feel that the society is very kibishi, harsh to people. And she sees how well Miriam is doing. And so it's nice that the family could recognize. And you could say, well, it's a family tragedy in a way that the family had to break up in order to do this, that one son's living in Japan and one daughter's in Israel. But when you see that everyone's thriving, everyone's healthy, everyone's developing themselves and using their energy to better themselves, not using their energy to stay afloat.
Right.
It's a big difference when all that energy that went toward saving family members or battling family members is now used in a productive way toward bettering ourselves and society. I see that with everyone. We're all doing it, and thank God for that. So I see it was a good thing. And I see too how important it is not to judge other families for their choices that they make in life, right? How sad they're divorced, how sad that they're separated, how sad. Channeling my mother here. But but I think she would say from wherever she is in the outer reaches that she's proud of the situation that we took, very hard situation, and sought solutions and put our own needs aside in order to do what was best for the kids. My son went to high school in Israel, and that's why he speaks Hebrew. And that's why his closest friends, most of his friends, are still in Israel. And he feels very close to society. So that's also, the gift of, just think, 3 years was all it took for him to feel so bonded to Israel. It's incredible. Question, will he live here at one point? Possibly. That would be nice. I'd love him to. But he's doing well in Japan. And when a child is doing well, it's such a relief for the parent. In a way, you say, you stay just where you are. You just stay. You keep doing what you're doing. Keep enjoying your life. That's my feeling now for him.
Well, what's interesting is that the situation with your daughter helped you, I feel like, propel yourself to be more into the mitzvot, being religious, and then you end up coming to Israel. It's kind of a tough question, but do you feel like it's part of God's plan to put the situation with your daughter, and then now you're here in Israel?
I think it was God's plan to put me and my ex-husband together for nearly 30 years. I definitely think it was God's plan that we both needed to have that marriage. We needed to bring these children into the world. We needed to really, for me to experience what it's like to cross into his world before I cross back into mine, and really to be emptied of all spiritual affiliation, really at rock bottom, before I could appreciate what Yiddishkeit, what Judaism could offer me. And when it really, as they say, what really happened to, they say there's no...
coincidence, right? Nothing random.
No atheists in the trenches.
Oh, yes. Right? Famous saying, yeah. No atheist in the foxhole.
No atheist, yes, right?
Yeah.
When you've got a kid in a mental hospital, you want to have Tehillim nearby. You want to have a tzedakah box nearby. You want to have a rabbi and a rebbitzin nearby. That got me through. And I said to myself, how could I what would I have done? What would have happened? And I saw my ex's reaction to the hospitalization. He actually went into a spiral, into his own massive depression, because he didn't have that anchor. And when I felt depressed and sad and crying, whatever, at least I had my Tehillim, and I had my community to be with, and it really, really helped. And the King David Psalms are so rich in exposing the human condition. Because
he kind of went through everything himself.
He did. And the message is always that this is momentary, that this will change, this too will pass. I took a lot of comfort from knowing that, yes, it's hard right now, but there's a bigger picture here that I can't see, I can't understand. One day I hope I will, but just go through it and just let it happen. Don't try to analyze it or try to fight it or even be drowned by the experience. I wouldn't let myself be drowned by the experience of having a hospitalized 14-year-old in solitary confinement. Hard as that sounds and was, I found a way to start and end each day with hope that we're working on the solution. We're working on getting her out. We're working on finding the the right formula, the right medication, this and that. And so this, I think, is very much embedded in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, this hope that we pray for solutions beyond what we even can imagine are available to us. So when I'm sitting in a Starbucks in Tokyo near my house, and I see this bicycle rider, in black and yellow, like a bumblebee, his racing gear, and he's sitting there with his latte. We're chatting. He has a nice, friendly smile. I find out he's a psychiatrist, and he lives in my neighborhood. He says, "Oh, take your daughter out of the hospital. I can treat her." Do you understand? You understand? That was not just something random. That was the answer to my prayers. So I started to notice and recognize that whatever was happening, the miracles that were happening were coming from the inexplicable divine nature. And that, of course, made me more interested and more passionate about Torah, and wanting to follow what I didn't understand, and accepting instead of analyzing. I want to understand why this and that. I said, you don't have to understand, just do. And then one day, maybe you'll understand. That's good enough.
When you look back at the whole situation, even before you were more observant, would you see God's hand in the sense you originally went to Tokyo for journalist reasons, correct? Do you feel that was part of the plan, that's what got you to Tokyo?
Absolutely. I mean, I was 25 years old, and I was given first class ticket to come to Tokyo to write a story. I mean, come on.
That's a hard turn down.
That was not normal, I thought. And the thing was, every door in New York was shutting to me.
Right.
Nothing was working out in New York for me in terms of career moves. And at least that was what I perceived. I could look back and see a different scenario now. But at the time, that's what I was thinking. And then I thought, look at this doorway to Japan. And then I thought, okay, that was beginner's luck. Well, 2 years later, I got another first-class ticket to go to Japan to write another story. And I thought, I'm not coming back this time. I'm going to be there for a year. I want to be in this culture and just understand it, what makes it tick, and write about it. And then I got a job working for the Japan Times. And 1 year led to a second year, and then the second year I met my future husband at the clinic, right, at the Eastern Medicine Clinic. Had never gone into an Eastern Medicine clinic before, had no idea about acupuncture or shiatsu or moxibustion or dietary restriction, any of that. And all I could think of was, so much to write about. I'll be busy for the next lifetime.
Is first class as good as they say it is?
It's wasted on people like me who don't drink. I thought it's totally ridiculous.
Free drinks there, right?
Yeah, and the other thing that's very weird and to be uncomfortable, annoying, is that you have your own private maitre d'. So you've got somebody basically serving you
the whole flight.
Yeah, it's like, come on.
That's a bit much.
It was much.
Okay.
It was much. And also, who was I at 20? It was just so. I thought it was bizarre, fun but bizarre.
A question I want to ask, because my background actually is in sports broadcasting, and I'm not sure if you're aware of this or not, because I think you were actually in Tokyo at the time, but there was a major sporting event, February 1990 in Tokyo, between a guy named Mike Tyson and Buster Douglas. It's arguably the greatest sporting upset in history of boxing in Tokyo. And one of the things that was brought up, because Donald Trump was there at the fight, and he said the people there were so polite. Because this is a boxing match, and this heavyweight champion is losing big time. If it was in America, Vegas, Atlantic City, people cheering. You have fights in the stadium during a fight because they're so into it. But the people had their hands like this, nice and calm and quiet. Would that surprise you, knowing what you know about the culture, that they were that calm?
No, because go look at the sumo wrestling tradition. It's a spiritual practice, Shinto wrestling. The whole idea of wrestling inside a ring where you first spread salt around to purify it, and you bow to your opponent. It's all based on respect. And no, it totally makes sense. Yeah.
That's very just perspective because the Western culture looks at sports so differently. They think like that the athlete should, like if they bleed, they kind of like it sometimes. They cheer for that. It's a bit twisted. But you say in Japan, it's a part of a spiritual practice. It's an art. Very interested.
Yes.
Very interested. So again, this is another episode of the Ari Lewis Show here on Israel Sports News Radio, also uploaded on the YouTube channel, The Nation of Israel. A couple of announcements I want to make. I want to say thanks to Pomerantz because that's where I got this book. And
Pomerantz Books in Jerusalem.
Yes. Right near Ben Yehuda Street, and so very conveniently located. People want to get the book online, though. Where can they go to?
They could go to Amazon.
That's the best place to get it?
It's the best place to go, yeah, if they want, yeah.
And also, you write a lot for the Jerusalem Post. People can keep an eye out there.
That's right, for the magazine.
Okay, and also you teach art as well.
I teach art. I teach art online. I run retreats. Yes.
If people want to get in touch with you, Facebook the best way? Or?
Facebook is fine. It's good. Yes. Or if they want to get in touch with me, it's Liane Wakabayashi at gmail.com.
Okay. And I also want to conclude by giving a shout out to Breathe Pilates Studios by Beth Zuckerman. If you want to get in shape, summer's coming up. Go find Beth Zuckerman on Facebook. Again, Breathe Pilates Studio. This is a great interview. I found it very fascinating. I'm happy we worked out.
Some astute questions. I appreciate your insights into what you've read, how you processed the book.
And I'm happy we were able to work out because I know you came from Haifa, and it's not the easiest trip, but we're happy to work out. Thank you everyone for watching,
Thank you.
God bless and good night.